All right, so welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something I think a lot of people listening will relate to,
Yeah.
and that is learning a new language.
hmm
Specifically today, we're going to be looking at someone named Alex and his journey to learning English fluency.
I think this is a topic that so many people either have direct experience with
Yeah.
or are just fascinated by, like, the dedication that it takes.
Yeah.
And I think Alex's story, which he details in his written account titled "The Journey to English Fluency: A Story of Perseverance," it offers, I think, a lot of good perspectives on this.
Yeah, we're going to be taking a deep dive today specifically into that story,
hmm
looking at what motivated him, what were the methods that he used along the way, what were some of the challenges he faced, and how did he adapt and improve,
Right.
and then ultimately, how did he reach fluency, and what are some of the lessons that we can all take away from his experience and apply to our own learning endeavors, whether it's language or something else entirely. And as we said, this is all based on his written account there.
What's really interesting when you start reading Alex's account is that his interest in English, it wasn't born out of necessity.
Okay.
It was actually through his exposure to English in movies and music and books, it kind of sparked this desire in him to connect with a wider world.
Right, so it started off as more of like an aspirational sort of interest.
Like a fascination.
Yeah,
Huh.
but then life often has a way of, turning those interests into needs. And for Alex, that was when he started working at a local cafe that was really popular with tourists.
Yeah, that cafe job actually ended up being like a real turning point for him
Yeah.
because suddenly this admiration he had for the language turned into a source of frustration because he couldn't communicate with the customers.
Right.
And he actually describes feeling very self-conscious and excluded in conversations
Right.
when he couldn't follow what was being said.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, and he tells this really vivid story about this one interaction where a tourist was trying to engage him in conversation beyond just ordering.
Yeah.
And Alex just felt completely inadequate because of his limited English, and that moment he describes as being this real turning point
Yeah.
where it shifted from this passive interest into this firm commitment.
Okay, so I want to pause there for a second and just think about that feeling for a second, that feeling of being stuck, that frustration.
hmm
Why do you think that is such a powerful catalyst for learning something?
I think it's because it creates a very visceral need.
Yeah.
Suddenly the benefits of knowing the language aren't just abstract anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes very real.
Yeah.
The ability to connect, the ability to understand, the ability to not feel left out.
Yeah.
And that emotional drive can be so much more powerful
Right.
than purely an intellectual motivation.
I think that's such a good point.
Right.
I think oftentimes we need to feel that pain point
Yeah.
to really get motivated enough to overcome that initial inertia.
Yeah. It turns it from like a nice to have to a must have
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot.
in that situation.
And what's interesting is that his initial response wasn't some grand plan or anything.
No.
It was a very simple action that he decided to take.
He started incredibly small, actually, just committing to learning 5 new words every day.
Okay.
He would write them down, repeat them, try to use them.
Yeah.
And it might seem really insignificant.
Yeah.
But that daily habit provided the essential foundation.
Huh.
It's really a classic example of how compounding small efforts can lead to huge results over time.
Yeah.
And then, as a lot of language learners do, he turned to movies with subtitles.
Right. But he didn't just passively watch, though, right?
No, he describes really actively engaging with the material.
Huh.
He'd pause the movie, repeat phrases, try to mimic the pronunciation.
Oh, wow.
And his choice of Forrest Gump, actually, with its relatively clear and paced dialogue, was a smart move for his level. Watching it repeatedly allowed him to gradually pick up on nuances that he missed the first time around.
Okay, so this is a good point here because I think a lot of people might just turn on the subtitles and just kind of let the movie wash over them. But he was actively engaging with the material.
Right. It highlights the difference between just consuming content and actively using it as a learning tool.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to show you that there's actually a lot to be said for repetition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watching the same thing over and over again,
Yeah.
you're going to pick up on more each time.
And that visual context helps with vocabulary acquisition,
Oh, that's a good point.
connecting words with images and actions.
I like that, yeah. And of course, no learning journey is without its challenges.
Right.
And Alex is very open about, the challenges that he faced.
Mm-hmm.
The times he struggled to form sentences, pronunciation errors, even instances where people laughed at his mistakes.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very relatable reality for anyone learning a new language. But his response to those moments of difficulty is really where I think we see his resilience and his commitment.
Yeah.
He talks about this one particular instance where he was ordering coffee, and he mistakenly said, "I like coffee, please," instead of "I'd like a coffee, please."
Right.
And instead of getting discouraged by the correction, he actually saw it as a valuable lesson.
That's so important, that reframing of mistakes.
Yeah.
Not as failures, but as crucial feedback.
Right. It's not personal.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process.
Exactly.
So having navigated these initial challenges, Alex recognized the need for a more structured approach.
Yeah.
He really started to think about a learning strategy and focusing on those 4 core skills.
Yeah, he was moving beyond vocabulary and passive viewing.
Right.
And he really became intentional about improving his listening skills
Right.
by regularly listening to English language podcasts and news broadcasts.
Wow.
Even when he didn't understand everything,
Yeah.
it was that consistent exposure that really helped him attune his ear to the rhythm and the intonation.
I think that's a huge point, right? Because I think a lot of people might get discouraged if they don't understand everything. But it sounds like he was really just focused on getting that immersion.
Yeah, just getting that exposure. And then for speaking practice, he really cleverly used his cafe job as like a real-world training ground.
That's smart.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
And he also found a language partner online
Oh, wow.
for regular conversations, so he was really proactive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And his approach to reading was really interesting as well.
Okay.
He started with materials that were accessible but still engaging.
Yeah.
Like children's books and shorter works like The Little Prince.
Right.
This allowed him to build confidence in vocabulary without feeling overwhelmed.
Right. So he wasn't just jumping into like Shakespeare right away.
Exactly. And then he started journaling in English
Oh, wow.
every day just to practice writing
That's cool.
and solidify a new vocabulary.
Yeah. So it sounds like he really understood, all 4 of those pillars: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and the importance of each.
And what stands out throughout his whole story is this unwavering commitment to consistency.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes that even when he felt his progress was slow, the regularity of his practice was key.
Right.
He mentions after about 6 months, he felt comfortable having basic conversations.
Oh, hey.
After a year, he could handle email correspondence.
Oh, well.
These were significant steps
Yeah.
forward for him in building confidence.
Absolutely. And I think that principle of slow and steady progress is so often underestimated.
Yeah, it's so easy to want like the quick fix or the magic bullet,
Yeah.
but really it's about showing up day after day.
Right.
And then he joined an English speaking club,
Oh, wow.
which is another, pushing himself outside his comfort zone.
Yeah. Because he could have just stayed at the cafe and just, talked to the customers.
Right. But he wanted to go and practice in a different setting.
Yeah.
And that's where real communication competence develops.
That's awesome.
He faced his anxieties and pushed through them.
Yeah. Good for him. And all of this effort culminated in him achieving a high level of fluency over about 2 years.
Yeah.
So it wasn't overnight.
No, it was a gradual accumulation
Yeah.
of learning and practice.
Right. And the rewards were tangible, a better job, more opportunities, new friendships, and ultimately the fulfillment of that initial dream, traveling and confidently using English
Yeah.
when he visited London.
I bet that must have been so rewarding for him
Yeah.
to actually go and use the language.
Yeah. And, it's funny because he started off with this dream and then it actually became a reality because of the steps he took.
Yeah, it's a great example of how language learning, it's not just an academic pursuit.
Right.
It unlocks real-world opportunities.
Right.
And fosters deeper connections.
Yeah. So as we look back at Alex's journey, what are some of the core takeaways that our listeners can take away from this and maybe apply it to their own lives?
I think the first and arguably the most important lesson is the power of consistency. Alex's commitment to that daily vocabulary study and regular practice across all 4 skills,
Right.
even in small doses, led to huge results over time.
Yeah. And I think also his healthy perspective on mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right. The coffee order mishap and his decision to view errors as learning opportunities.
Right.
I think that's crucial for anyone.
Yeah, it's about that mindset shift.
Yeah.
From fearing mistakes to embracing them
Right.
as part of the process.
Yeah. And then the immersion aspect as well.
Yes, even though he wasn't living in an English-speaking country,
Right.
he actively sought out ways to immerse himself.
Yeah, through media, through conversations with others.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that everyone can do no matter what they're learning.
Yeah, and lastly, I think the importance of motivation and having a clear personal goal.
Yeah.
Alex's initial fascination, and later his desire to travel and connect with others.
Yeah.
That really kept him going
Right.
to the challenges.
So keeping that why in mind, I
Yeah.
think, is really crucial.
It's so easy to lose sight of that
Right.
when things get tough.
And what I think is really cool about this is that, these principles are universal.
Yeah.
Whether you're learning a language, you're learning a musical instrument, or learning a new skill for your job, or just anything that you want to learn.
Right. These core elements are always going to be relevant.
Right. The consistency, embracing errors, the immersion, and the motivation.
Exactly.
So considering Alex's dedication and the rewards that he reaped from that dedication,
Yeah.
here's a final thought for you listening. What's one small, consistent action that you could take today
Yeah.
towards a goal that you have?
What's one thing you could do right now that would move you closer to where you want to be?
Yeah, whether it's language related or something else entirely.
Hmm.
Maybe that one small step is all it takes to start you on your own journey.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive,
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
and we'll see you next time.
See you later.